We are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. I'm seeing some familiar names, and I know some of us were able to make the training earlier this morning where we got to learn about Strengths Finder and the ways that we can use the strengths of our students to better supervise and support them, and how we can start from the place of what our students are really excellent at. One of the things that got brought up is that a way to discover those strengths is through WiGROW conversations. And we have these every semester. And some of our students are probably really well versed in this. They have a lot of experience. Some of our students are brand new to having these conversations. And the same can be true for us. We might have been facilitating these conversations for a while, or we might be a little bit new to the process. What we're going to talk about today is how to have better WiGROW conversations. What are the types of things that we should be doing in our WiGROW conversations? What are the ways that we can make sure that we're really getting the most out of that? Sometimes, 10 or 15 minutes that we're spending with students talking about transferable skills and how they're learning in the workplace. First, I would love it if we could all navigate to the chat. If you'd like to share your name and pronouns and where you work, that would be fantastic. And then also if we could share why we chose to be here today. What brought us to this particular training on a Thursday afternoon? As we're doing that, I'm gonna quick tell us what our objectives are today and what we can expect from our time together. So at the end of the training today, we will be able to understand the most important principles of WiGROW conversations. For some of us, this might be review, and for some of us, this might be brand new information. We'll have experience asking and answering WiGROW questions. We'll have a chance to identify how we and the students we supervise and our work environments each shape WiGROW conversations. And then we'll also have a chance to adapt those questions and our responses to questions to our own voice and to our own students in our workplace to make sure that when we have these conversations, they're coming from a really authentic place and they feel natural and comfortable. We're going to do that by first having a quick introduction to the principles of WiGROW conversations. We'll do that all together. Then we're going to break up into small groups and we're going to practice and discuss alternative questions in those groups. We'll be doing a lot of small group work today. So there's just a warning. My background is youth work and camp directing and education. So I'm really big on participation. You will all get a participation trophy at the end of the session today. Once we do our small group breakout, we'll come back together and talk through the purpose of our WiGROW questions. That's because we're really trusting you as supervisors to pivot and to adapt these questions to different situations and to rely on your expertise and experience with that student and with your workplace. And knowing the why we ask certain questions can help us do that in a way that honors what's really effective about the program. And then after that, we'll break out into those same small groups again. We'll discuss specific challenges that can come up during our WiGROW conversations and reflect on how we might respond to those challenges before coming back together as a full group. All right, I hope everyone's had a chance to introduce yourselves in the chat. If you haven't yet, please drop your name and where you work in there, and then let us know what brought you here today. We're going to dive right into principles of WiGROW conversations. There are really 5 characteristics of excellent WiGROW conversations. We found that when we adhere to these kind of basic foundational principles, our conversations are more effective and more enjoyable. So first and foremost, WiGROW conversations are non-judgmental and they're not an evaluation. So it's really tempting for me when I sit down with a student to tell them all the things that they're doing well, but it's more meaningful for the student for them to share what they're doing and for them to share what they're learning and for them to observe what they're doing well. WiGROW conversations aren't a time to offer advice or suggestions for how to change the work, so much as to ask students, tell me more about that. Tell me what you're learning through that process. Tell me what you want to learn. The second principle of WiGROW conversations is that students are the ones doing the talking. We always say that the person who's talking is the person who's learning, which is why you guys are going to be doing so much talking in your small groups. So we really want the student to be the center of that conversation and to be able to offer their own reflections. The third characteristic of WiGROW conversations is that we adapt those to students' needs and to the work environment. It would be pretty silly if we expected the exact same thing to happen among a supervisor and a student who were working in the Rathskeller and a supervisor and a student who were doing accounting and business services, and a supervisor and a student who were managing the front desk at Recwell or in housing. Those are all really different jobs. And there are so many more different jobs across campus that we're all in. And so we really rely on your expertise as the supervisor to adjust these questions and this style of conversation to what you know will work best in your environment and to what you know will work best for your students. On my team in my office, we have 2 students, and one is getting ready to graduate and the other is a freshman. And those 2 students are going to have really different reflections. They're going to have really different questions and ideas about what they're learning in the workplace. And so as supervisors, we adapt to that. The fourth characteristic is that we emphasize relationship building. These conversations are ones where we listen actively to students and we check in with them as humans at the very beginning to see how they're doing. Because we know that when we build more trusting relationships with students and when we set up a more trusting conversation, those students are able to be more vulnerable. They're able to be more authentic in that conversation, and that all leads to better learning. And then finally, oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. Finally, we ask open-ended questions. This one's a little bit tricky for me because I want to know how the conversation is going to go before I jump in, but open-ended questions don't allow for that. Open-ended questions really allow the student to take the conversation in the direction that they want to. So a student might be learning things that are completely different than what I think they're learning. And the open-ended questions, and those are offered to you, so you don't have to try and think of brand new questions from scratch. Those open-ended questions really let students direct and drive the time that we have together. All right. We are going to, as promised, switch into small groups. And Jen, I'm going to make you a co-host so that you can put us into those groups while I share what we're going to be doing. So as a small group, we're going to take turns introducing ourselves and we're going to practice one WiGROW question. So from our own perspectives, me, Brenda, in the job that I have at Human Resources, what skills am I learning and practicing in my job? Each one of us will do that for ourselves so that everyone in the group is able to answer. And then after that, we will be able to have a discussion about what that was like. So what did we notice about the different ways we answered that question? How did it feel to answer that question? How did our environment or how we know each other impact that? And we will, mid-conversation, send out a document that includes alternative questions. So we'll take a look at those questions and see what could we have asked differently? What might have felt more natural to us or to our circumstances? Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience as we had some technical difficulties during that breakout session. I hope you still got a good chance to connect with other supervisors, talk about the skills you're learning or practicing in your job. and take a look at those alternate questions. Those alternate questions are in the supervisor handbook, which is on our website, and they'll also be included in a follow-up email. So if you didn't get a chance to dive into those too deeply, they are a list of questions organized by these 5 core WiGROW questions that we ask that help us pivot to something different if we think our student would respond better to a different way of asking about a similar topic. So our 5 WiGROW questions, as we probably know, are tell me what's new with you, what skills are we learning and practicing in our jobs, how have you learned from other people in the workplace, whether that's supervisors or coworkers or even customers. How does this job impact our college experience? And then how is this job preparing you for your career? We know that students have already started their careers, right? Like this is, maybe the first or second line on their resume when they go on to whatever job is next. So we're trying to help students connect those dots. We have those alternative questions in order to help us pivot, but I want us today to know why we ask each of these 5 questions so that if we have something different that we want to ask, we can feel free to do that. WiGROW is a program that has been studied nationally and that we've looked at really closely here at UW, and we know that it works. But we want it to work in a way that makes sense for you and for your student. So that's why we're sharing this why, so that you can be confident as you pivot or shift to a different question during those conversations. The first question, tell me what's new with you, is because relationships between supervisors and students are the #1 most important factor in students having positive things to say about their on-campus jobs. We had someone take a really close look at student survey responses here at UW, and students who felt supported by their supervisor, who felt close to their supervisor, who admired their supervisor, had so many good things to say about their experiences on the job. And so we want to start with that. As humans, we also just know that you start with asking, hi, how are you? And we wanted that to be officially a part of this conversation. The second question that we ask, what skills are you learning or practicing in your job? This is the one that we might have had a chance to review and answer in those small groups, is because when we start with a concrete, specific example of what I'm learning, then it's easier to answer the rest of the questions because I have an example in my mind. I might be thinking of a specific moment when I learned on the job or practiced a skill, or I might be thinking of a skill more broadly that is something that comes up on a daily basis, and the examples will flow from that idea or that competency that I'm focused on. The third question, how have you learned from other people in your workplace, is because in order to create inclusive workplaces, we need to be able to listen to one another. This is one specific skill, but it's one that we really wanted to elevate. Students are learning by doing, and they're contributing so much to their jobs. And we want this time when we're pausing to think about what we're contributing to also be a time when we can recognize and honor what other people are contributing and what we might be admiring about our colleagues and what we might be able to learn from them beyond just learning from doing our own job independently. The fourth question that we ask is, how does your job impact your college experience? Even our students who work really few hours a week are probably on the job maybe 5 hours, and that's more than they're spending in their lecture halls. That's more than they're spending with the TA in their discussion section or in their lab. It's probably more than they're spending with other students in that student organization that they're a part of. Their on-campus job is a huge part of their time here at UW. And we know that that can influence all other aspects of their college experience, and it can enrich all other aspects of their college experience. So we want to have students start connecting those dots between what am I learning in this job and how can that benefit me outside of this job. The fifth and final question, how is your job preparing you for your career, is something that I think really supports our students when they go to find their next job, when they go to find that summer internship, or when they graduate and are looking at grad schools or an entry-level position. Because once we've said it out loud, what we're learning in this job and how that will help our next job, it's going to help us articulate that same concept on our resume and in our cover letter and at job interviews. I don't know when the last time each of you sat down to write a cover letter was. I helped a friend edit one earlier this week, and it is a painful process sometimes. It's hard to advocate for ourselves and to recognize how much good work we do. And that's why I was helping out this friend, is because she needed a second set of eyes and a third set of eyes. And so having this conversation with our supervisors while we're in the job where we're doing that good work is going to help us and help our students to be able to better write about that and better speak about that as they're pursuing whatever opportunity is next. So when we're thinking about the context of these WiGROW conversations, when we are having these conversations in our particular workplace with our particular students, and we want to make adjustments, these are the principles that we want to hold. So we're thinking about, how have you learned from other people in your workplace? And maybe we're pivoting to a different question, but we're trying to get at that same idea of listening to other people, learning from other people, and having an inclusive workplace. We are going to do a quick activity. So if you have a pen and paper near you, or if you just want to open a quick note on your computer, I'm going to ask us to write down the name of one of our student employees. Think of a specific student employee who you're currently working with or who you've worked with in the past, and write down their name. Then write down one of their core job duties. Maybe this is a student who spent a lot of time answering that phone, or maybe this is a student who worked in customer service, or who was in charge of particular custodial tasks, or who led yoga classes. We have students doing so many different things on campus. And then write down what year they are in school to the best of your recollection. We are going to share a poll. And this poll includes the alternative questions for that third question. How have you worked with and learned from other people in the workplace? Considering the specific student who you wrote down, just select which alternative question you think that you might use when talking with that student in a WiGROW conversation. And obviously no right answers, no wrong answers. Great, thank you all. One thing that we might notice about these alternative questions, and this was done on purpose, is that the questions that might be harder to answer are towards the bottom of these alternative lists. So we might expect a student who is a senior, or a student who has spent 3+ semesters in the job, to have an easier time answering that question of, is there anyone unheard or overlooked in our workplace? And a student who is brand new to the job, or new to college, hasn't had this experience of mentorship before, might benefit from a more introductory question. One of the questions about who has influenced you in this job, or even that title question of how have you learned from other people in our workplace? I would encourage you all, I warned you that I'm an educator, so I am assigning homework here. I would encourage you all to take a look at that alternative question list and consider that same student, and maybe just note to yourself which question for each of the 5 would you consider asking that particular person. Because sometimes those conversations, when we look at them as a whole, we might go in different directions than we expect if we're looking at just one section. All right, we are about to go back into small groups here. So let me talk through what we're gonna do. We will send these questions in the chat so that you have a chance to look at them this time. Thank you so much for your patience and you're willing to pivot earlier in our small groups. We're also going to send you a link to a set of scripts that can help us respond to different situations that might come up during a WiGROW conversation.